This episode of Lord Johnlander includes sensitive topics that some listeners may find distressing or triggering. Listener discretion is advised.
Welcome to Lord Johnlander, the Outlander podcast for Lord John fans, where we talk about all things Outlander, but especially about Jaime and his Sassenach.
And sometimes we talk about Claire, too.
For however long it takes, we'll lead you on a journey so chaotic, you'll question every life choice that led you to be here today. And like the Hotel California, you can check out anytime, but you can never leave.
We may not be the Outlander podcast you wanted, but we will be the Outlander podcast you didn't know you needed.
Now, before we get into it, this is your one and only warning that show and book spoilers are lurking around every corner. We're going to spoil stuff from future seasons, future books, and our own brains.
Remember, if you can't prove our headcanon didn't happen, then we can only assume that it did.
If you make it through the episode in one piece, we'd love to hear from you. Send us your burning questions, wild theories, thick prompts, flattering compliments, or whatever's on your mind. You can contact us on Twitter and Tumblr at Lord Johnlander or on our website at lordjohnlander.wordpress.com, where you'll also find our archived episodes, teasers, fic recs, and more.
Hello, welcome to Lord Johnlander. We are your hosts. I'm Mistress Pandora. You can call me Pan.
And I'm Beth.
This week we are talking about episode 207, Faith, or as I like to call it, the one with all the bad things.
Yeah, lots of bad things. Lots and lots of bad things.
Fun fact, this is actually the only episode before today that I have seen twice. Other than like the rewatch for the podcast. This is the only one I watched twice on my own. Not because I just wanted to, but because I had a friend who was watching it after I had already gone through the series, and it was my fault that she got into it. And I watched it with her for moral support. And we weren't together, but I think it was during the pandemic, like early 2020. We were texting each other. We would do that sometimes. We would text each other, watch it together, be like, okay, 1, 2, 3, hit play. And we're like 20 minutes in. She's like, this is awful. When does it get better? I said, season 3. Hang in there.
About halfway through.
Yeah, just hold on to it. We'll get there. So did you want to hop right into your history lesson? Because I think we may have hit a special interest of yours, because it looks like you wrote a little book report.
Anything can be a special interest of mine, given the right conditions. So, and then I happened to find a really good research paper about it. So it just not like a kid's, like high school, like
no, like NIH,
like a legit, yeah. So, so because I was watching the episode and, I just realized that, not a lot of people watching would even really quite understand like what's going on with Claire, especially when she's has the fever, and then Raymond comes and saves her because it's also like tied up with all the magic shit and stuff. So anyways, what sparked my quest was the question, did people in the 18th century know that a retained placenta could cause puerperal fever? And that word is a mouthful. I'm probably going to stumble over it every time.
You did better than I could have. I'm going to let you just go.
Okay, perfect. So, and then that led me to this. So basically, puerperal fever was sort of a blanket term for any sort of fever condition after childbirth, and it almost always ended in death. So it would start like within 3 days of giving birth, usually on the third day. Once it developed the chances of survival were extremely low. And this like really perplexed doctors, especially in the late 18th century and early 19th century, because physicians at the time were actually trying to gain prestige and trust by positioning themselves as man midwives, right? So, midwives who were men. So they were doing that, and then, patients were freaking dying, and that didn't look good for their reputation. So they took a pretty keen interest in trying to understand what caused this illness and if there were any ways to treat it. So the actual term puerperal fever was first used in 1716 by a guy named Edward Strother, but there has been evidence of this phenomena, this illness, going as far back as, we have any history. And it's now known that it's actually caused by group B strep, which is something that now women get tested for when they're like around 36, 38 weeks pregnant. They actually get swabbed in a couple places, and they test for that, so that if they have group B strep, they will, as soon as the woman goes into the hospital, they will start running antibiotics for them. But of course, they didn't know what group B strep or what any type of infections really were. So hence they started trying to figure it out. Another interesting phenomenon that they started noticing around the same time period, more like the late 18th century, mid to late 18th century, was that it could be like epidemic. Like there would be pockets of women in a similar place dying of puerperal fever. It would be like a 70 to 80% fatality rate. And actually, I found this really interesting, is that the first account of puerperal fever as an epidemic, what happened in Paris in 1745, 1746. So, yeah, which is kind of interesting. Timely, right? And that's all like documented and stuff like that. And then there were a whole bunch of epidemics reported throughout England and also Scotland through the end of the 18th century. They needed to understand not only what was causing it, but also why did it sometimes seem to be contagious and sometimes not. Basically, their main focus of study was whether or not the fever was caused by inflammation or putridity, which even though there were like two different schools of thought on it, you can, as I read the article, I will link. So if anyone else is sparked by this little lesson, they could go read it too. But basically, it wasn't really either or, because like if they thought it was inflammation, they thought that like the inflammation led to something becoming putrid. And if they thought it was caused by something putrid, then that led to inflammation. So they really weren't two different schools of thought, really. But it also kind of didn't matter, because the only cure they could come up with was, of course, bloodletting.
Oh, our favorite.
If they thought it was inflammatory, they would do the bloodletting to try to somehow reduce the inflammation. Or if the inflammation led to the putridity, I guess is the word, then they would bloodlet to try to get rid of, what was decaying or whatever in their bodies. And so all roads led to bloodletting. This is the 18th and 19th century. So,
I mean, never mind that the patient is already bleeding.
Yeah,
like a lot.
Let's just do a little more,
Just a little more, just a little vent hole up top won't hurt. Good gravy.
So I pulled out just a few interesting like moments in time as they studied this, because as I read it, I was just fascinated by like how they would get so close to the answer, but like couldn't connect the dots, obviously, because they didn't have a good understanding of what we now know as infection and bacteria, and that bacteria causes infection. So it was interesting because as I'm reading it, I'm like, it's right there. Just go one step further. But of course, hindsight, right? There was a physician named Alexander Gordon, and he was a man midwife in Aberdeen in the 1790s. And he was one of the first ones to emphasize that puerperal fever could be transmitted from one woman to another by the birth attendant. And of course, this was a pretty controversial idea.
That, like hand washing.
Yeah. Well, and
nope.
No. Yeah.
It's still never mind.
No, I know. I was having the same thoughts, and I'm like, am I going to go there? Am I going to go there? Yeah. So, anywho,
I'll stop heckling. I promise.
And then there were a lot of guys, of these physicians studying this, writing treatises on this and all that. But it wasn't until 1839 that a physician named Robert Ferguson argued that any sort of damage or injury to the placenta during childbirth could have, quote unquote, dangerous consequences that would set up a reaction that led to puerperal fever. So he was so close.
So close.
It's so close. And I do want to say that retained placenta isn't the only way to get puerperal fever, but it was a pretty surefire way to get it. So he was so close. And then Oliver Wendell Holmes, who was an American in 1843, and Ignaz Semmelweis, who was a Hungarian in 1860, both wrote works that were seminal to the understanding of the infectious nature of puerperal fever. So, that's something like, I want to say 70 years after Alexander Gordon first kind of was making that connection. There were other people kind of writing about it more. And then in 1850, James Young Simpson noted the similarities between puerperal fever and surgical fever. So it's like, okay, you're almost there.
Close.
But the paper that I was going off of, it really only studied it up until the mid to end of the 19th century. So I didn't really get into how it was discovered. But so basically the point of me kind of going back and doing this was trying to understand if they had any knowledge of the fact that if Claire had retained some of her placenta, that could be the cause of the fever. And then the answer was no. However, Raymond obviously had that knowledge because he just goes in and, reaches in there and just freaking yanks it out. So
just grabs
it. So, and we do know that Raymond himself is a time traveler. So whether he's been to the future, he probably has been to the future and knew these things. And so that combined with his healing powers were what was able to save Claire, because like I said, it was considered like a fatal illness. So by all rights, Claire should have died.
That's a fascinating research hole you fell into, Beth.
It really was. I was also going to get into looking into, because my theory is that the reason that Claire delivered early and that Faith died was because of a placental abruption, which for those not in the know, that's when the placenta tears apart from the lining of the uterus, and it can cause heavy bleeding. And it can also cause, so depending on how bad it is, it can cause the woman to go into labor. and it can cause the child to have a lack of oxygen and all of that stuff. So, and it can be brought on by a lot of things. Stress is one of the factors that can contribute to it, and probably, walking around a hospital and
Not taking it easy.
not taking, and not that women shouldn't do any sort of working or labor when they're pregnant, but if you're prone to it happening, it's that those things are going to exacerbate it.
Yeah.
But I didn't get too much into that. That's just kind of my working knowledge of what it is. And that's always been my theory of why Claire went into labor early, why she had the bleeding prior, when Mother Hildegard made her stay the night before, and all of that.
Makes sense. It tracks.
Yes, it does. So anyway, yeah, so that's the explanation you didn't ask for. But on to the rest.
I think before we get too far, I just want to take a moment. There should have already been a trigger warning at the start of this anyway, but I just want to be real specific. So because we are talking about episode 207, Faith, the one with all the bad things, this conversation that we're going to have is not going to be our usual bubbly, happy, laughing selves. We will be discussing sexual violence again. We'll make sure that there are support resources linked in the social media as well. RAINN.org, RAINN.org is a really good one for that. And also we are going to be talking about the death of a child. So this is going to be a very heavy episode. So mind your mental health, and we'll make sure that there are support resources available should you choose to use them.
Absolutely.
You have way more thoughts about, I have lots of thoughts. None of them are nice. I don't really like this episode. I'm just going to be honest.
Yeah, it's a tough episode. And I don't want to say that I like it. I mean, I do think it's a well done episode. Not in the fact that I like it when all the bad things happen in one episode, but given the material that they had, I do think most of the episode was well done with a few caveats. And I think that part of that is just Katrina Balfe's portrayal of a grieving mother.
Oh, she's brilliant.
She's so good. She just captures, I've never had to experience this, thank goodness, but she really just captures what I would imagine would be just the panic and the anger and the mania of what she's going through, having woken up and not having her baby there. And I mean, she just does such an amazing job with that. So
yeah, she really does.
So I just think that's a really big part of it. And I do think that Outlander handled this well. They don't handle a lot of other tough issues very well, but I do think that they handled this well, and they gave the character the space to grieve. And yeah,
I do agree. They handle loss and death pretty well on the show. It's other things. We'll get there. We've gotten there before. We'll get there again.
I do want to point out that, again, this episode starts with a flash forward, which is kind of weird.
It's like dated and everything, so it's not like she's just dreaming it.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Like, it's kind of like, too, like they weren't really prepared. Like, they had, like, a little girl with red hair, but, like, it's not like it's the same little girl that, like, plays her in season 3. And, like, it just kind of looks thrown together to me. It's like, it was almost like it was an afterthought. And I don't really think it was necessary, and I'm not going to spoil what you're going to talk about in a little bit, but something that you wrote in your notes made me think twice about the beginning, but I'm going to save that until you get to that part. I did have one kind of like, also, I was just like, that scene where they're working on her. And I was just like, imagine being like in and out of consciousness and you look up and the dude who told you that creepy story about holding a beating heart in his hand is the guy that's like trying to save you in your baby's life. Like, holy shit.
I mean,
Anyway.
yes, because as far as, well, that was the last time we saw her. That was the last time they saw each other.
Yeah.
And fancy meeting you here, man. But at the same time, though, to be fair, other than he's a wackadoo, he is as competent I hesitate to say physician because we know what his day job is. But he's as competent a medical professional as she's going to find. Between him and Mother Hildegard, she can't possibly be in better hands.
Well, I mean, let's be real here. It is the 1740s. He is probably more competent than a lot of the physicians. At least he didn't do any bloodletting, okay?
He knows she did plenty of that on her own without the help, and I'm so sorry for the dark joke there. But the executioner in this case is very well versed in the things that make bodies stop sustaining life. Yes. And he just, the logical conclusion is do the opposite of that.
Right. Just reverse it. So, yeah. No, you're right. She is in probably the best hands she could be, considering she cannot deliver her own baby. I'm kind of just looking at my notes because I had made note of when Claire said, when the priest came to give her the last rites, and he asked if she wanted to confess her sins, and she said, "My sins are all I have left." I thought that was a really interesting line, and I had a moment where I thought that maybe it was connected to something she had said in book 1 to the priest at the Abbey, but it wasn't. So moving on. I still thought it was kind of an interesting thing to say.
It's a good line. It's a good gut punch line.
Yeah, absolutely. And I do also have to say that, we have been sort of building up this whole season where Claire has been doing a lot of shit that isn't cool.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because, I don't think like the first couple times that I watched it through, I don't think I really was looking with the critical eye that I was looking at it this time. And so I really kind of, tried to step out of my kind of love for Outlander and, look at what the character is actually doing. And, it was pretty shitty. Some of the stuff that she did. And that gave me a greater appreciation for her slow realization over the episode that she made a lot of mistakes that led to her being in the position that she's in. And I'm not saying she did bad things so her baby died. That's not at all what I'm implying. But she did do things that put her in the position she's in terms of being alone, not having Jamie with her, just a lot of stuff. And so it was really interesting to see her progress in that realization over the course of the episode, because when she finds out that Jack Randall's alive, she thinks to herself, well, Jack Randall is alive and that means Frank still is too. And then she finally asks, but at what cost? Mm-hmm. And, she did a lot of things in the name of keeping Frank alive, a lot of things that were not good. I think she's finally kind of feeling the cost of all of those things that she did.
Yeah, I agree. And to emphasize your point, she didn't deserve this, but she made really selfish choices, and it led to a really horrible situation.
Yeah. And it actually gives me a greater appreciation for the character to now look at this with a more critical eye, because if I'm just sort of watching this and just, being like, Claire can do no wrong, then you don't get the same depth of character from her that you get when you are seeing her realize that she fucked some shit up.
Yeah. Finally, a little bit of character growth.
And it's interesting to think about that, because you want your characters to grow. And I think that tracking Claire's growth depends, your ability to track Claire's growth depends on, like I said, like how critically you look at her earlier decisions.
Yeah, if you are already coming into this thinking she's completely justified and 100% right and like she can do no wrong, she has nowhere to go.
Yeah. Yep.
See, it's okay to be critical of the things that you like. You can see the nuance when you do that.
Absolutely.
I find it interesting that Claire refers to Randall as the cat with 9 lives, because that parallels very strongly to ways that Jamie is described throughout the series, particularly in the books, but like eyes slanted like a cat comes up a lot. The whole thing with the fortune teller in Paris when he was in college with Pierre, and she said that he would die 9 times before it stuck.
Yep.
There's an interesting parallel.
I think she even referred to him as a cat, didn't she?
Something like that.
Something like
Probably.
that, yeah.
And like the way he moves through the forest is like a big cat kind of. It's just a lot of cat imagery in relation to Jamie, and so yeah, I don't know what it means, but there's a parallel.
Yeah,
I'm too tired to unpack that, but there it is. Do with it. I don't feel well. Do with it what you will. If you come up with something, please let us know.
Yeah, there's definitely some type of connection they're trying to make there. But I do love the imagery of Jamie as a cat. And I'm going to go a little off track here, because it's constantly mentioned that you can't ever hear him walking, right? Like he just walks so quietly. And I just love that William is so much like Jamie in so many ways. But like, I don't even know if it's ever specifically mentioned, but everything else I know about Willie makes me feel like he walks around like a fucking elephant. Like heavy footed, like you can hear him coming a million miles away. And yeah, because he's just not as agile as his father.
In his defense, if you were his papa, would you want to teach that kid to be sneaky?
No, that is very good. That's
not what you want.
Good point. Yes, that is a very good point.
I can imagine that there were like literal conversations in which William was being instructed in the ways of walking proudly like a man by Lord John, and it's how like announcing your presence way before, and like just I can see it. I could just see it, because he is just always one bad day away from an ulcer. Parenting that child.
He's like, dear God, my nerves are already frayed to the very last thread from the boy's father sneaking up on me so much and never knowing when that man's just going to pop up out of nowhere. He's like, I can't do it again.
I don't have nightmares of Crayfeld, but I do raise a Fraser.
like I cannot, his heart couldn't take it if like Just like William popped up out of nowhere and he looks so much like Jamie. Like John's like, I'm gonna have a heart attack. I can't do it.
This is the real reason he drinks beer for breakfast. It has nothing to do with digestion. It's because he needs to fortify his fucking constitution to get through the day.
Well, it might have something to do with his indigestion.
Right.
It's fucking heartburn over that boy.
Start the day hammered. It'll be fine. Yeah, John.
Oh my God.
Too. I drink like that too. I love him.
It's interesting to me too that Willie's always getting lost too.
Jesus Christ.
Which I know is supposed to like symbolize that he is lost. But like one could also argue that at the beginning of Outlander and immediately prior, Jamie was lost. And he still, could find his way out of a freaking cardboard box and William can't. If that child gets lost in the fog one more fucking time, I swear to God.
Oh, the Great Dismal Swamp.
I
actually don't live too far from the Dismal.
No? Oh, makes sense.
Really. I didn't realize that until I was saying something about, I think I was listening to the audiobooks, a couple years ago with my husband, and I mentioned it to him, and he goes, the Dismal's not that far. I'm like, fucking for real? And so Google, like, oh shit, there it is. That's a lot of swamp.
Of course, now you can probably drive around it, in like a couple hours or something.
Highway gets that was a fun tangent.
It was. I love Willie. Okay. Can't wait for season 7. Okay.
Back to the depression.
I also I kind of had to laugh at myself a little bit because Mother Hildegard tells Claire, throw your grief into the sea. Or throw your anger into the sea. Oh, I said grief in my notes, that's why.
Or
and
Claire
says, there isn't a sea deep enough. And first of all, I love that exchange because it just shows Claire's mental state at that moment. Like, she is so pissed at Jamie. She truly thinks she's done with him. Like it's done. She has no love for him. And she tells him later she hated him in those moments. But then I also thought like that's me at like the slightest inconvenience. like everything is catastrophic. Anyway,
big feelings.
I'd also just like to take a second and point out that one of the minor criticisms I have about this episode is the way that it kind of bounces back and forth. And they didn't do a terrible job with it, but I do in some ways kind of wish they told it a little more linearly. But anyway, I digress. The scene when Claire comes home and comes out of the carriage with Fergus and the servants are all lined up and then she thanks Magnus. I don't know what fucking subliminal messages or shit they are putting in that scene, but it makes me blubber every goddamn time. Like, what is it about that scene that is so heart-wrenching to me? Like, I don't understand it. And I mean, I get it, but also like the whole episode is heart-wrenching. Why does that scene destroy me every time? I don't get it.
That scene gets me too, and it kind of irritated me a little bit how much I cried over this episode the third time I watched it, because like I know what's fucking coming. But I actually, because I saw your note about that particular scene, I started really thinking about it. So some of the things that they did were the sound falls away and you just hear the mournful music. There's not really a whole lot. There's a little bit of voiceover, but not really. The servants are all lined up there in a funeral procession, like she's doing an honor walk from the carriage to the house. Suzette just starts bawling. And then the way she curtsies to Magnus.
Oh God, I'm gonna start crying.
I know. I'm
talking about it.
back in their tier. Get back in their tier. Yeah.
I just can't.
Because he saved her life. He
did.
carried her to the hospital.
And he was, because we didn't really talk about this when we talked about that in last week's episode, but yeah, I mean, he didn't want to let her go to where the duel was happening. So he accompanied her, and he was the one that was holding her hand and trying to, like, he was doing the things that Jamie should have been doing.
Yep.
And he's the one that saved her life. And again, that's usually Jamie's job. And here's this servant who, you know, he's a servant. Like, he would have every right to, like, just be like, you know, do the bare fucking minimum. But he didn't. And it shows how much they all loved Claire, and then how much she appreciates him. And it's a far cry from earlier in the season when she was just kind of like talking in front of the servants like they're invisible and annoyed with the servants for like doing their fucking job. But again, that's part of her humbling.
Yeah. I hate to say it, but I don't think that humbling sticks.
Well, I mean, Claire is not a humble character by nature, but I do think that it taught her to be less capricious with other people's lives. And I think that it started to give her the inkling that she, just because she's a time traveler, doesn't make her God.
Yeah.
Because as somebody with knowledge of modern medicine, modern 1940s medicine, going back into the 18th century, saving a lot of people's lives with simple shit to her, so stuff that's simple to her, and being able to feel like she can act superior to people because she has all of this knowledge, and all of that, I think, kind of builds her up to the point where she thinks she can probably change history, right? So it's like, it's almost like a slow kind of step up to that, to where she gets to that point. And then not only does she get to the point where she thinks she can change history, but then she thinks she holds life and death in her hands on more of a transcendent plane. Like, not just as a physician, but like her actions could cause somebody in the future to cease to exist. And that's getting really fucking close to the sun.
Yes.
I think she got knocked out of that to at least a degree.
And she has to live with the consequences of how long it took her to get there for the rest of the season, and then for 20 more fucking years.
Yeah.
The rest of the season is just punishing Claire for her God complex. That was maybe a controversial statement. We'll see if it holds up at the end of the season.
Yeah, I'm not like appalled or anything. I'm just like I just like have to kind of to watch it again to kind of see that.
I'm just thinking cause and effect as we go through this again, and like the conversation that I want to have at the end of this. Like, there's a lot of, you have to keep cause and effect in mind when you're analyzing media, when you're writing media, that kind of thing. So this drive of hers to try to stop the rising is futile. She's realizing that she's not above pain and absolute just rock bottom trauma. She can't play God. She couldn't play God for herself or her own child. What does she think she can do for a whole country? And now she's stuck with the consequences of her actions.
Yeah. Yeah, time travel just did not do good things for Claire. I mean, of course she met the love of her life, but yeah, it's like, and I guess I've just never really thought of it like this. Like the stuff I just said, I was really kind of getting there, like as I was saying it.
Yeah.
And like, but yeah, it really, and I could see how just the fact that you freaking time traveled could give you that sort of power boost, right?
Oh, yeah.
Like, holy shit, I can transcend time. Like, what the fuck?
It's super special to me. It really did have horrible consequences. Yes, she met Jamie, but Jesus, at what cost? Good Lord.
And I think that, because I think when you said God complex, I had to think about that term a little bit, because I don't think that Claire has I don't think it's her innate nature to have a God complex. I think it came about because of the situation that she's in. But call a spade a spade. I mean, that's basically what it is. And basically, and if you look back, especially over this season, you can see how it sort of just spins out of control. And I think part of the reason it spins out of control is because when Blackjack Randall took Jamie and did the things that he did to him, and Claire had a really hard time reaching Jamie, and then kind of resorted to being heavy-handed and not going about it the right way. I think she already had realized that she was losing her control over things. Because for up until that point, especially like once she married Jamie, you know, I think that, well, I'm trying to think. Even when she was kidnapped by them and under their, you know, they were holding her prisoner, she still felt like she could control the situation in different ways.
Oh, you mean when the Mackenzies were keeping her?
Right. So like, I think that like she sort of always felt like she could control situations in any sort of way. And I think that probably one of the first times she realized she couldn't was when Jamie was taken by Blackjack Randall and all the other bad things. And she couldn't control anything. Anyway. Okay. That was a good think. It's a good talk.
Yeah. Thinky thinks and feelsy feels.
Okay, so now
next bad thing.
Well, actually, I think we should just kind of finish talking about if there's anything else about Claire with let's talk about Louise and Claire first, and then we'll talk about the other bad things. Second really heartbreaking, I mean, the whole thing is heartbreaking, but second particularly heartbreaking moment is when Claire has been holding the baby for like all day, and finally Louise comes and convinces her to let the baby go. Oh my God.
May
heartbreaking.
That is the sweetest we've ever seen her.
It is. And I think that Claire keeps telling us that Louise is a good friend, but we don't get to see it until that happens. And in the book, I'll point out too, it goes even further, because in the book, when Claire gets out of the hospital, she doesn't go back to Jared's. She goes to Louise's like summer home or something. Mm-hmm. And stays there for quite a long time. Like Jamie is in the Bastille for like months. Yeah. In the book. So, and you just see Louise's just total generosity and, you know, taking Claire in and all of that. But yeah. Okay.
I wish I remembered this version of Louise after I had watched through the first time. Like, because I think I said, not last episode, maybe it was the one before, whatever, with Louise and her friends, and they're just being awful. That's what I remembered of Louise.
Yeah.
But something I got out of this rewatch is I will remember Louise more fondly.
That's good. I like that.
I may not remember season 2 very fondly, but I will remember Louise and how sweet she was there at the very end.
That's okay. The better half of the season is coming.
If for no other reason than there is like 5 minutes of John.
Yes. It's not even David Barry, but
it's not even David.
It'll do.
I'll take it.
We'll take anything in a pinch.
Anything we can fucking get.
Oh God. Okay, so we got to talk about the next bad thing, and I am just, like, did they really just show a child being raped? Like,
yes.
Are you fucking kidding me?
Mm-hmm.
And why don't we talk about this more? Because it's obviously not the most graphic, but
it's pretty bad.
It's a child, and he is played by a child.
I would like to point out this is the second time a child has been raped on screen in under 3 hours of runtime.
Second.
Mary.
Oh, Jesus. Yeah. Oh, my God.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no kidding. Yeah. I think part of it for me that makes it a little bit worse is that the actor himself is a child.
Yes. Yeah.
And I hope that when they filmed it, because you never really see Blackjack Randall and Fergus on the screen together during the actual attack. Like, you see Fergus with a hand on him, and then you see Blackjack. So hopefully they filmed this in such a way that was not traumatizing to the actor. I hope he's okay. But and it's like, we don't ever talk about this, but I think it's because it's just thrown in this episode where all you ever really remember from this episode is the whole sequence of Claire and coming to terms and all of that stuff. And then just throw a child rape in there.
I think the reason we don't talk about it is because it didn't happen to Claire or Jamie.
True.
Even though it had consequences for everybody, but we never really see Fergus struggle with this later. I mean, maybe a little in season 6, kind of, sort of. Like, it's some baggage that comes up with Henri Christian. But
right.
That's about it.
Well, and if you remember when we talked a little bit more about Fergus's life in the brothel, in the books, it is made clear that Fergus was used as a whore from time to time in the brothel. And they don't mention that at all in the show.
Yeah.
Not that it makes either better or worse, but it's, it's just...
It was still traumatizing to him in the books.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah, it's not like he was just used to it. Like, what child should be fucking used to it?
Oh, no, not at all. And I think it probably was even almost worse because he finally felt like he was safe.
Yeah.
And maybe not worse, but it was probably shocking, even more shocking, because he thought he was safe. And I can't believe they show it. It was just so unnecessary. Yeah. I'm like, why do I have to sit here and watch this?
Such a good question.
Like, did they think, to me, because it's not like, I don't even want to go there, but your audience is not fucking stupid. You could set that up so that it's heavily implied without actually showing it happening. And we will still understand how angry Jamie was to be driven to break his promise to Claire. Like, we didn't have to see that to to understand that Jamie's actions were justified.
Because our imagination is way worse than anything they could have shown on the screen. And what they showed on the screen was pretty flippin' bad. But I can't think of a single person, particularly a parent, who hasn't had this horrific, maybe it's just an intrusive thought, but something could happen to my child.
Yeah.
And imagines the absolute worst. Like if you've ever lost your kid in the mall,
Oh my God.
Like they've wandered off at a campground or something. Like if you've never experienced that, I'm so very happy for you. But if you have experienced it, you know exactly what's going through your head. And it is even worse than this. We didn't need to see it because we know.
And I mean, honestly, I think that like 99% of the population, like, could have seen way less of what they did. And again, like I said, they would have been like, oh, yep, Jamie, you're good. You're good, bro. Go ahead. It's like, we're not stupid. Don't treat your audience like they have no imagination, and that they need to be beat over the head by what happened.
It's still not the historical accuracy bullshit excuse. It's still not like good storytelling. I'm just going to completely say that. It's still not good storytelling. It's not statistically accurate. This is not like, why would you make this like a family fucking bonding activity in your media across 6 seasons?
Ugh.
Like, why? I do have more thoughts on this, but it fits into the other conversation.
Okay. Well, we're almost there. I don't know if we really need to talk too much about Claire at Versailles. Again, did not need to see that. Well, first of all, the whole thing with her and Raymond and the Comte, I feel like that dragged on like just a little too long.
It did.
Like it was interesting. I liked how Claire kind of brought up, Lady Sleeplay, like she did some good thinking on her feet. I loved when the Comte tried to get out of trouble by admitting that he poisoned Claire. But then it just kind of, it was like, okay, we get it. Like, all right.
I was just, I was just looking at the Comte's costume the whole time. Like his suit, that shiny suit is just, it was mesmerizingly beautiful. I loved it. I love that very much. And then that shitting his pants look of absolute fucking terror when her necklace turned black. I'm like, oh, here we go.
That is like a good moment, because like, you're like, oh shit, Claire is giving this guy mercy. Holy crap. Nope. Well, and not that she did it, but like,
but she knew what she was doing. It was fantastic. I mean, he'll get better. He's fine. Yeah. But just that shitting his pants, like, fuck, I hope this works.
Yeah, I forget how they explain that. Like,
they don't, but he's a necromancer. So I don't remember if they really actually explain it like in detail, but in the space between that short story, we see him like experimenting on rats, bringing dead rats back to life. And I think it maybe was in an author note that like it's based on the fact that there's always been like a Comte Saint-Germain and kind of has always looked the same. And so it's kind of like that whole Keanu Reeves is a vampire because he's in all of these historical pictures and stuff. You know that theory?
Yeah.
It's kind of like that. So he's a necromancer, and I don't think they actually explain how it happens, how it works, but it does. And I hope we get to see him again because he's just fantastic, and I need more of that Jamie Comte energy.
But if he's a necromancer, necromancers don't raise themselves from the dead.
Okay, he's a zombie. I don't know.
Well, because I'm just trying to figure it out, like, because Claire says that Raymond must have poisoned the drink. Mm-hmm. But like, did he really? Or did he just give him something that made him look like he was, like, you know, like fucking Romeo and Juliet shit?
Maybe. I don't know. Now I kind of want to listen to The Space Between again.
Yeah, I got to go back and read that again. It was a long time ago that I read it.
It's been a while.
By a long time ago, I mean like 2 years or something, but my brain is not the same that it used to be.
It had been 5 minutes. I've already forgotten. It's fine.
I'm trying to remember in Versailles, because there was a couple comps in the TV show Versailles that were, you know, related to or part of the court or whatever. And I can't remember if there was a Saint Germain or not that they on there. Anyway, it doesn't matter. Okay. So here we are.
You have this statement that you put in the notes that you're surprised Louis wasn't scared to have sex with Claire after she admitted she was a white witch. I think this is as close.
I was like, you know what? I'm just going to skip that. But you're like, nope.
I can't let it go. This, I think, is as close as we're going to get to the Pan Horrifies Beth segment for this episode, because I just don't have it in me. But does that just make him a monster fucker? Sit with it. It's fine.
I don't know. Yeah. I mean, he's a monster. But yeah. That whole thing, again, like, I did not need to see that. I just, of course, as a woman who has given birth, all I can think about is, like, how she's not healed and just, anyway.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then I had a very poor, that would have been in poor taste. Okay. Shut your mouth, Pan. Speaking of character growth. Moving on.
Let's talk about story structure and pacing.
Okay. So there is a video that a friend actually shared with me. We kind of talked about it for a while, a couple days ago. And if I can remember to drop the link in the document, we can post that on, we'll have posted that on social media. If it wasn't there, it means I forgot. So let's talk story structure and pacing. I told my husband that we were going to talk about this, and I phrased it like, there's such a thing as too much bad shit to put your characters through. And he goes, oh, hell, if you're saying that.
It's true. He has a point.
That's I said valid. Shut up. So thinking of writing a story, whether it is a novel or a TV show, film, whatever, writing some sort of work of fiction, your characters need to have bad things and defeats and setbacks and all of that, you know, awful shit. It's required in most genre structures to get your protagonist from the beginning to the end. So we have the beginning of the story. We have, you know, kind of your thesis statement. This is exactly what his life is. This is status quo. This is where we are. Something is missing. And then when we get to the end of the story, we have the bookend of that. It's usually a mirror image or some sort of a reflection of that first scene. So you have to get them. There's a long process that it takes to get from point A to point B. So without living through this bad stuff, your protagonist can't grow and change. And if he doesn't grow and change, they can't reach their goal. So we do see that in this episode with Claire is growing and changing because she's experienced these, you know, very, very bad things. But there does come a point where the protagonist loses sight of the goal completely, which I think we also see in this episode. And their goal shifts to just simply avoiding more pain, more trauma, more torment, more hurt. And this is where your audience starts to lose hope. It's okay for your characters to lose hope, at least temporarily. But once you've lost your audience, you've lost your plot. So there has to be like this thread of hope that runs through all of the angst and the trauma and the awful shit, even if only the audience can see it. If the character can't see it, that's okay, as long as the audience can see it.
And that's where I was like, okay, maybe that's why they included that scene with Claire and the child.
Yeah.
Because maybe they're like, don't lose hope. She's going to at least she is going to have a baby. But you're like, okay, but she's still in the 50s. Like, what happened to Jamie? Whatever. But maybe that's like, when I read that you had put that on there, I was like, oh, interesting. Maybe that's why that's there. But I mean, it was pretty piss poor effort on their part, but maybe that's why.
Because then we immediately know that this is not the same child.
Right.
So all of this relates to pacing of the story. Long form fiction, your films, hour-long TV shows, even, some 30-minute TV shows can be, long form depending upon how they're structured. Novels, these are a marathon, not a sprint. So you have to manage your pacing very carefully and intentionally. And that is as far as the running metaphor is going to go, because I don't run, not even when chased. But it's a long process, right? You have to manage the pace. Yeah. If I run, I'm already a zombie. It's fine.
Yeah. If I'm being chased, I'm just gonna let whatever higher power is out there, take the wheel.
Jesus, take the wheel. We have already established I would have not made it off of Craignadoon. As soon as running became involved, that's it. Done. Anyway. But in managing your pacing, there has to be ups and downs. It's not going to be a consistent pace throughout. There's going to be faster pace, slower pace, because that's what keeps the characters moving. There have to be rewards and payoffs, but also costs and setbacks. Even in those really dark, angsty fiction where it's just like, it can't possibly get any freaking worse. How is it going to possibly get worse? There still has to be even small rewards, payoffs, to maintain that thread of hope throughout the narrative. Your characters can be on this just one-way street of just to absolute self-destructionville, right? They can have completely lost hope and they don't care, just burn it all down and let God sort it out. But you still have to plant spaces for that character to breathe along the way so that your audience can breathe along the way. It lets them keep going. So what does this mean to me for this episode? At some point, your story usually demands that you completely rip the rug out from under your characters. And this usually happens about 75% of the way in. And that's not me making shit up. That's Save the Cat structure, which you can apply to virtually any work of fiction. An episode this traumatic, though, might actually be a really good choice, but I think at this point in the season, it's too early because now things still have to get worse.
Yeah. And I think it's interesting because in a way, this season is really 2 seasons.
Yeah.
Right. Like I feel like it's like such a clear demarcation. And I think I even said something like last week or the week before, I can't remember, about this being the climax of the first half of the season.
Yes. And so if you think of this as 2 seasons, then it came too late. It should have been the second half of the previous episode and not all of this one. It went on too long. So this episode is really just absolutely hopeless in a frankly, generally hopeless season. We know that Claire and Jamie are going to get separated because we saw it. We know now that they are burying a child because we see it. Claire at the beginning of this episode has given up completely. And after she comes home, she is content to brood and drink and hide in her room. And I can't blame her for that. I absolutely can't imagine doing any better under the circumstances.
No.
At all. I can't. But here's the thing. What drives her to pick herself back up again is learning about Fergus's rape. That's the thing that spurs her into action, that helps her forgive Jamie, that moves her to go to Mother Hildegard and try to get Versailles. So, I have said this before, and I'll say it again. If your plot movement requires raping your characters to keep the plot going, your plot is not properly structured.
I agree.
There, I said it.
Well, first of all, I want to say I laughed a little when you mentioned pacing because Diana has no sense of fucking pacing.
No, it's everywhere. It's very sporadic.
Her books, especially as they've gone on, have become more and more like nothing happens until there's like literally 50 fucking pages left. Like it's like 900 pages and then like 50 pages where everything happens.
Yeah. Bees was really like that.
Bees was like that. A Breath of Snow and Ashes was like that. I mean, if you go back and look at that book and just like, I don't have a physical copy, but like I can just imagine because I've kind of done the math on my ebook. Like everything happens in like the last like 50 to 75 pages. It's unbelievable. And I remember when season 6 was on, I was like, they only have one episode left. How are they going to fit this all in? Like, there's so much. And of course they didn't, because they ended the season early, and we'll get to see some of that at the beginning of season 7. But her pacing is just terrible. And again, it's like, because she writes out of order, and when she writes things that are interesting to her but really do not serve a plot, she doesn't seem to cut them. I mean, maybe she cuts a ton of stuff, and then if that's true, holy God, no wonder it takes her 10 years to write a book. But like,
you're not wrong though.
It comes down to editing. And like I said before, I am not trying to say that I'm the best writer on the planet. Okay. I have, it's a hobby for me, but I write things all the time that I don't end up using, even if they're really good, even if like it really tickled my brain to write it and I thought it was really cute, or I thought I did a really good job with it, or whatever. Because if it's not serving the plot, it doesn't belong. And it just...
But that's not to say that you can't have... It's not filler if it does serve some purpose. And maybe that purpose is character development. Maybe that purpose is world building in an organic way.
Yes. I agree with both of those things. Yeah.
But there are ways, like, and I get it. Like, you don't want to just throw away the stuff that didn't make it. Well, and if you're writing fan fiction, you can always share that. You can put it on AO3 or on Tumblr and say, hey, it didn't make the final cut. Here's a deleted scene. Yeah. Or if you are writing a novel, especially if you're, an indie publisher, that's the thing you can put on your Patreon.
Right.
Help pay for your freaking editor. That's my plan.
Exactly. Yeah, it's just...
The pacing, the criticisms that we have, like... How do I want to say this in a remotely kind way? Diana got very lucky with Outlander. Mm-hmm. She does have a natural talent for a lot of things. I'll say that. A lot of things about writing. Like, specifically, there's definitely raw talent in the books. What I see, though, like you said, what you said was needs an editor. I think also it would benefit from some study of the craft. I don't see evidence of that. I don't see evidence that there have been, like, I don't see it growing. Here's a good example. Jim Butcher. Love him or hate him, whatever. I like the Dresden Files. And his debut novel is the first book in the Dresden Files series, Stormfront. And it's not bad. It's structured well. It follows the general urban fantasy genre, not formula, but story structure. It hits the gritty, like, PI, detective noir kind of feel and tone. It hits those points. It's not his most polished work. But as you read the series, and he's like 18 books into it or something by now, you see the writing develop. You see the style flourish and improve. And it's really fun if you read an author, if you're, you know, nerd ass like me, to read an author from the beginning of their career through towards the end, and you can watch it. You can watch it develop and blossom. I've been rereading Anne Rice and talking about it with a friend who's also rereading the Vampire Chronicles, and you can see her structure and her format, her writing style change and develop and grow, and the stories evolve in positive ways. I don't see that so much with Outlander, and it doesn't mean they're bad books. It doesn't mean that I don't like them. It doesn't mean that I regret having ever read them. Like, obviously, I have devoted a lot of fucking time to this fucking fandom. Holy hell. I was lost the minute John Gray entered my life. It just doesn't... She got very, very lucky. She's got raw talent, but I don't see that there has been a lot of development in intentional ways.
Yeah, and I think that's an important point. I don't think it's intentional. But I will say that I do think that she does a better job honing her story with the Lord John books.
Yes.
Because she set out with them intentionally, that they, like, I feel like she wrote them with so much more intention.
Yeah.
Right? And I'm not saying she did an outline, God forbid, but she knew what type of story she wanted to write, and she knew it was like she kind of knew how to get there, because it's more, their books are more like a procedural than they are, you know, and so I do see that. But again, I don't even know if that was intentional or just the nature of what she's writing led her to be more succinct in her writing than with the big books.
It may have been. I mean, I do kind of see some evidence of outline and planning out, and I know she's got it. She knows what she has an idea of the story she wants to tell, and I understand the what's the word? It's getting late. I'm getting tired. The approach of allowing the story to kind of develop as you write it. You know, writing by the seat of your pants. It's a valid way to write. That stresses me the fuck out, but it's a valid way to write. I need a little bit more structure and then freedom to, you know, play with it. But with the Lord John books, they are shorter. The point of view is tighter. And even like Brotherhood of the Blade, I would say, is the most meandering of that series. And even it still follows a goal. There's a couple of goals and they intersect, but it's a character has a need or a want and an obstacle to get to the goal.
Yeah.
And there's a very logical cause and effect kind of progression that doesn't require like a diagram to get through. So yeah, I do genuinely enjoy the Lord John books, no matter how much I want to rant and rave about the Scottish Prisoner. Fucking they should have fucked in Ireland.
I remember on one of the Facebook groups for the books that I kind of like pop in every now and then just to see like how horrifying people are. It's Outlander Facebook is like a freaking cesspool. Like never go there. Like it's
as
like
bad as Twitter is. I can't even imagine.
It is. I mean, Twitter looks like a walk in the park on a sunny day compared to Facebook.
Hot garbage. Hot, soggy garbage.
Somebody had posed the question like, how many authors can you name that have written the same series for over 30, it was like 30 or 35 years, I can't remember. And it was just kind of implying that Diana's like the greatest person ever and greatest author ever. And I was like, well, Stephen King in the Dark Tower series. So I'm a big Stephen King fan. and I've been reading his books since I was a kid, probably since I was way too young to be reading Stephen King books. I think I read Misery when I was like in 6th grade or something, 6th or 7th grade.
Golly.
My daughter has already read like half of it, and she's 13 now, but she was reading when she was like 11. I digress. But when you were talking about watching the author you mentioned growing, it's the same experience with Stephen King in the Dark Tower series. The first book in that series was actually started as like a serial. And then it was kind of like thrown together into a book. And then like he did go back at some point, like in the like late 90s or early 2000s, and like kind of redo it a little bit. But the first book in that series is like, it's really hard to get through. And you kind of just have to push yourself through it. But since he wrote this series over like 35 years, like you can see him growing as a writer. And of course he's got so many other books too that you can watch that growth and stuff. But yeah, I mean, he's been writing longer than Diana has.
And it's more prolific.
Oh, but what I do love is that so like the vast majority of his books all still exist in the same universe, which is just fascinating to me. I don't know if you've ever seen the graphic of the Stephen King universe that somebody did like 5 or 6 years ago.
No, I haven't.
I'll show it to you, and I'll post it just for funsies. Okay. It's mind-boggling. Like, it's so complex.
It's like Disney Pixar?
Yeah. Oh, they got nothing on him because he is so prolific. And then like this one character that was like a super minor throwaway character in one book, all of a sudden shows up maybe again as a throwaway character in another book, and then like 5 years later shows up in a book as like the main character, like and you're like, oh shit, like but then he was talking to it'll blow your mind, but like the Dark Tower series is considered like kind of like the keystone of the universe. It's wild. It's wild, which is interesting because the Dark Tower itself is in the series is the keystone, and there's like it's like a multiverse, but like there's one universe where the Dark Towers exists that is the keystone universe. So it's kind of wild.
This sounds like I can understand, knowing what I know about you as a person and everything you have mentioned about this series now and in the past. I get it. This tracks. This tracks.
I mean, you want freaking time travel, multiverse, the whole 9 yards. I know you don't.
I don't.
But if anyone listening does, you got to check the Dark Tower series out. It's so good. You just get through the first book. It's pretty good it's really good after you've read the whole series and then go back and you're like, oh, all of this shit makes way more sense now. Because the whole book you're going, I don't understand what's happening. Anyway, I digress again.
So how about some things about this episode that just make no sense?
Oh, shit.
You want to go first?
Why did Claire have to call for Jamie when Raymond was saving her life? That was kind of weird, right?
It was deeply uncomfortable.
Yeah.
It was deeply uncomfortable. And I can't necessarily handle up in there. I can't articulate why it's so deeply uncomfortable, but it was deeply uncomfortable.
Because he's deeply got his hand shoved up in her vajayjay. Okay,
he's up to his
and he's like, call your and he's like, call your man. Like, what the fuck? What in the Studio 54 is happening right now?
Oh.
Anyway,
The only thing I found to be kind of mind-boggling on this one is how much Claire is just like really characterized as being a terrible liar unless she's got plenty of warning and having a glass face. And I really relate to being a terrible liar because I also play along like a monkey with a mandolin. How then did she manage to pull off such a convincing act with the king and the witchcraft and all that shit with no warning? Because all of a sudden she's on Broadway.
It's interesting you mentioned that because I was thinking about that when I was watching it. And I don't think she actually does a very good job. I think Louis is just kind of like out of his depth. And
I mean, I wasn't buying it.
I mean, she ain't fooling anybody. The Comte and Raymond already know what's up, right? So everything she's saying to the Comte is just like she's just basically leveling the accusations at him that he already knows about. Mm-hmm. And like, if you look at her face and like some of the gestures she makes and the way she's talking, I think Katrina Bell actually does a really good job of portraying Claire as a shitty actress.
She did.
Which is quite a feat, right? Because like she does this weird thing, like where she puts her hand in front of her face and like whatever. And like, it's so cringe. But I think like, I just think Louis is just like portrayed as just like out of his depth with this shit.
He's going along so he doesn't look like the idiot.
Exactly. That too. Like when the Comte is like, she's a witch and Claire's like, yeah, but I'm a white witch. And then Louis is just like, she's not on trial here. Like he's like trying to maintain control. Yeah. And like, but like, I think there is also a part of him that like believes that she is a witch. Mm-hmm. Because he definitely believes that these guys are evil or potentially evil. And I think he's kind of like I think he sort of pulled her into that room to exert power over her and to kind of make her dance like his puppet. And she just sort of did her Claire thing. And even though she is a shitty actress, like she was trying to control the narrative and trying to control what happened. And he was trying desperately not to lose control of the situation. And in his mind, she's like way more powerful than he actually thought she was going to be. So I think it's just a lot of like power dynamics and, you know, weirdness happening. I don't think she actually did a good job acting.
But it worked. That's the main thing.
Exactly. It worked. Everything worked out. Yeah. So we did talk a little bit about John and
we did
the Brotherhood of the Blade and we're just gonna skip Pan horrifying me this episode because I'm already freaking horrified enough by the actual episode.
Yeah. Hard same. I already used the word monster fucker. It's fine. We don't need to revisit that.
We've got fucking, I don't need to recap.
How about a fic rec?
Let's just get to the fic rec. I picked one. It's called The Best by Far Is You by Flying Home Against the Wind. And it's written by someone that I interact with a lot on Twitter. She's a very nice person, wonderful person. And it's a Faith Lives fic. And the Frasers stay in Paris after Faith Lives. And it's no. They go back to Paris. That's right, by the end. Anyways, Faith Lives. There's definitely some great angst. There's some separation. There's some reunions. There's Paris. There's family cuteness. So it's got a little bit of everything. And it will definitely be a nice little hopeful piece of writing after watching 207. So
there we go.
Give it a read and hopefully, and give the author some love, and yeah.
Excellent, Rec. We'll make sure that has been linked in social media. If you're listening on Spotify, well, it's I think on most podcast platforms, we do put the links in the episode description as well. I know in Spotify it's clickable, take you right over to AO3. Just thought I'd mention that. I didn't see any mail this week. I guess we should probably just remind folks that this is our last episode for a little while. We are going to take a hiatus for the holidays. Less stress for us. Maybe more for you. I don't know. But we will be back with episode 208 on the 6th of January.
Yeah, it's going to be a long hiatus. But yeah, we've been working on this podcast continuously since April, right? So
yeah, we haven't really taken much of a break.
We definitely need a break. And I think we mentioned this earlier in the season, like we were going to take a break between season 1 and season 2, but then I was kind of like, but wait, the calendar lines up perfectly if we did half and half. So
this is your fault.
My brilliant idea. So now we're going to all take a nice break for the holidays, whatever ones that you celebrate between November and the beginning of January. And then we'll come back and yeah. And by the time the next episode airs, 911 Lone Star will have aired its first episode of season 4. So I can now sit around and anticipate that, without, I don't know what I'm trying to say. I'm tired, but like I can now devote myself fully to being a 911 Lone Star fangirl for the next 6 to 8 weeks. So just in the nick of time. But yeah.
Well, do continue to send us mail, comments. Find us at Lord John Lander on Twitter or Tumblr, or lordjohnlander.wordpress.com/contact us if you want to get right to the contact page. If you have thoughts, thinky thoughts, feels while you're dealing with, whatever you may be dealing with for the next few weeks. And we would love to hear from you. So, with that, see you in 2023.
Bye.
If you're listening to this, it means you survived another episode of Lord John Lander. We'd love to hear from you on Twitter or Tumblr at Lord John Lander, or on our website at lordjohnlander.wordpress.com/contact us.
All opinions expressed on the Lord John Lander podcast belong to us and are not affiliated with Outlander, Sony, Stars, and definitely 100% not with Diana Gabaldon.
This podcast is not suitable for children, immature adults, homophobes, anyone who takes fandom seriously, people who don't understand that the characters aren't real, people with sticks up their ass, people who hate fun, and people with no sense of humor. Do not try any of these hot takes at home. We are professionals.
And if you know us in real life, no you don't.